you comes in the name of the Lord.
Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. Many of you may not be aware, because the media has been covered up with the COVID-19 virus coverage, that April was Autism Awareness Month. And as a part of our commitment to bringing issues that face believers all over the world, autism is one that faces 1 in every 59 children in the world are impacted by autism, according to estimates from the CDC's Autism and Development Disabilities Monitoring Network. According to research, 1 in 5 kids have Tourette's syndrome, meeting criteria for autism. My executive producer, Jason, has Tourette's syndrome and is very open to talk about some of the challenges in his life in working in media. But it does not stop him, and he has an Emmy Awards and Edward R. Murrow Awards to show for his accomplishments, even with what many would consider to be a diagnosis that would be a stigma, not something that would open doors. So why is it there's still misconceptions and misunderstandings surrounding the disorders, and what will it take for that to change? Autistic children can sometimes make easy targets for bullying. According to Time magazine, bullying can lead to depression, low grades, behavioral problems, even physical illness because of the stress it causes, and kids with autism may be suffering the brunt of that harm. Many children on the autism spectrum comprehend and function very differently than a typical child, and tend to have different understandings, social cues such as hugging, and possible boundaries. Marcia Hinds is an autism parent, as well as a credentialed teacher with degrees in sociology and psychology from UCLA. Her inspirational book, I Know You're In There, Winning Our War Against Autism, shows what is possible for children who are treated medically in conjunction with intensive behavioral and educational rehabilitation. The experts said Ryan would need to be institutionalized, but today her son is an engineer at a major aerospace company. Marcia works as a behavioral and educational consultant and has for more than 2 decades. But her most impressive credential is that she's Ryan's mother, and their family survived autism. Her new book, I Know You're In There, tells her story in a way that's heartwarming, heartbreaking, and sometimes hilarious. Here to share this amazing story, I Know You're In There, Winning Our War Against Autism, is Marcia Hinds. Marcia, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
I am so excited to be here with you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here. Marcia, I want to go back to your upbringing, to your environment, both spiritual, both the faith, both the desire to want to go into your area of sociology and psychology. What was the drive behind all that, and what did you experience as a young person that were the foundation stones that you couldn't see being laid, but now in hindsight and retrospect you see, oh, well, now I know why this happened. This helped lay a cornerstone. This was a pillar. This was, the foundation's the most boring part of any building, but you can't build a high-rise without a solid...
Most important part, yes.
Most important part. So that's where we want to start with your foundation.
Well, to be honest, I went into psychology and sociology because I started out as a math computer science major at UCLA, and oh my gosh, I just wasn't smart enough to do that. My son, Ryan, is the guy who does that. He actually tutored Calculus 5 in college, and when he was a young kid, we moved from Minnesota to California, and there was kind of a disconnect in the math areas. And it surprised me because there were some math things that he couldn't do, and he was the math guy. And so I would sit down with him and I'd say, oh, Ryan, let me help you with your math. And he'd start laughing because he knew I couldn't do it. But by explaining it to me, he figured it out himself. Uh-huh. And I always think that's kind of interesting, that sometimes if we just give our kids the spotlight, they figure out what to do. My parents were both my mother was running from the Nazis, actually. Her mother was a actress on the Jewish stage, My father was in the Army, and he spoke fluent German. They were both from Germany. I'm first generation American. And because he spoke fluent German, they used to use him to interrogate prisoners. And he would pretend like he didn't speak German. And then they would start speaking among themselves in front of him, and that's how he got some of the information. So I have a very strong, proud Jewish heritage. I'm married to a nice Catholic boy, so we call ourselves cashews. You know, we're a little Jewish, we're a little Catholic. It's sort of interesting to me that we're really on the same page. We believe exactly the same, pretty much. And it wasn't always that way, but as time went on, we've been married 43 years, and we seem to understand each other.
You know, it's very interesting that my father came from Budapest. My grandfather was a Prussian general, spoke 7 languages, and used the same technique that in Germany he would listen in to conversations. In Hungary, of course, he was well known as a horse riding general with the Kaiser Wilhelm big helmet,
Yes.
but hid their Judaism until it was 1934. He had gotten intelligence that the communists were going to take over Hungary, and so he got the family out. He tried to get the rest out, but they would not go. So half were lost.
Yes, unfortunately.
In Budapest, and taken from Budapest to one particular death camp, one particular concentration camp prior to going to Birkenau, Auschwitz and Birkenau. But they were thrown in with the gypsies and all the rest. And it's very, very interesting. My journey to faith, I came 44 years out of the Orthodox synagogue into believing that Jesus was the Messiah, and have spent the last 24 becoming more Jewish than I've ever been in my life, by understanding and being doing postgraduate work in first century Judaism, which most people would consider what Christianity is today, which is nothing like what Christianity is today. First century Judaism was the Messiah had come and the Messiah was coming back. And Orthodox Judaism is the Messiah is going to come. So they're not that far apart. It's just a timing mechanism and a belief system. But as a Jewish mother, you are bred for tenacity. My Jewish mother is 93 years old.
We are darn stubborn, that's sure, for sure. Tenacity, it's stubbornness. You know,
Well,
if you tell us we can't do something, you know, they told me my kid would never get better, and I thought, I am going to show them. And when I had nothing else, I had that anger, because I was so tired of trying to help Ryan and getting up every day to autism. And I would sometimes, when I had nothing else to give, I would sort of remember that anger I had when that psychiatrist who was the leading authority told me, there's no hope, there's no cure, there's nothing you can do. My kid was barely 4, not even 4, and she gave him a life sentence. And when I had nothing else, I would remember that scene in her office when she told me that, and thought, you know what, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you, and I have. And fortunately, a lot of other people have learned because of Ryan's success, and that makes me very proud. I just heard from a mom from Ireland today. I was talking to her on Facebook, and I said, well, if you need any help, you know, just call me, because I never charge, and, you know, I'll help you any way I can. And she said, you saved my kid 3 years ago. He's 5 and totally recovered. So that was such a wonderful thing to hear this morning. And I hope people realize that the book is really the roadmap that we used to help Ryan recover. And it wasn't easy. I talk about all the mistakes that I made and all the wrong turns that I made, but God always seemed to have a plan. And I was not very religious when I first started this journey. And I remember thinking, maybe I better hedge my bets a little and have a little conversation with God. And I said, God, if you help mine, I promise I'll help them all. And now I can't stop. I have to keep going because I have a lot of kids to save.
Yes.
And, all the profits from the book go to research and to treatments, developing treatments. And I don't want to make a dime off of this. I just want kids better.
And that's what we all want. That's what we all
Yes.
want is, it seemed like all of a sudden autism appeared out of nowhere. It was, I grew up in the early 50s.
There weren't any kids with autism then. Maybe 1 in 10,000.
Yeah, autism wasn't something that wasn't even a word that any of
Right.
us, wasn't in our lexicon. Even in my Bachelor of Science in Education at Penn State, and had a minor in special ed. Okay, autism, 1969, 1970. We didn't have autism. We had Down syndrome. We had
Right.
other issues that we were dealing with the blind, dealing with the deaf, dealing with the physically handicapped or physically challenged, learning disabilities, but we didn't even have dyslexia. We didn't have, there was a lot of things we didn't have in our, and I was trained to be a teacher in the elementary school system, and we just, I don't recall, maybe it's because I'm getting older, but I just don't recall ever covering those subjects. So
It's kind of interesting because as undergraduates, 15 years before Ryan was born, my husband had he needed to get another class at UCLA, and it was really hard at that time because all the classes were very full. And I said to him, I heard about this one class called Behavior Modification, and it was taught by Dr. Ivar Lobas, who is the father of applied behavior analysis, which is the kind of method that a lot of people use to treat autism today. And I said to Frank, let's go listen to this class, because he was just beside himself, that there weren't any classes that he could take. I said, let's go listen to this class. And we both sat in, and it was so entertaining and amusing and informative that both of us signed up to take it. So we were both behavior therapists at UCLA. After we finished that class, we went on to be therapists before Ryan was even born. And this is where I think God has come into play. There were so many things like that happened.
what year?
Made it
What year are we talking about?
Well, let's see. Ryan was born in 1988. We were at UCLA from 72 to 76, I think. So that was a long time ago. And, to be honest, I didn't learn back then. When we were therapists, they would give us a drill to do with the kids. They didn't really give us the theory of why we were doing what we were doing. And, now I know so much more than I did then. And before Ryan was diagnosed, I didn't even realize he had autism because he had a few words of speech. And the kids that we worked with were self-mutilating, head-banging, no speech at all kind of kids. And so I thought, well, he couldn't have autism, but he did.
There's a whole world out there that looks at vaccines and the various drugs that are in almost all the vaccines as being the trigger for all this. Do we know? We really know?
Well, let me say what I believe. what I believe that anything that compromises our children's immune system can be a trigger. So, that includes environmental things, that includes illnesses, that includes genetics, that includes vaccines that have a lot of additives in them. I don't think it's the vaccines themselves. I think, everybody's a little right on that subject, because some people think, as soon as you mention vaccines, everybody goes to their corners and the fighting starts, which I really hate. I wish that they would stop that and just instead become one voice to help these kids. Because if you realize what's really going on, that it's a compromised immune system, if you can fix all the medical issues with the immune system, then our children can learn what they couldn't before. Okay? And, whether it's caused by an illness or it's caused by, a predisposition in genetics, my son has something called the MTHFR gene mutation, which means he doesn't methylate properly, okay? And like when there's toxins in our environment and bad things, he can't get rid of them as well as a normal immune system can. I also have that. But yet there is a drug called leucovorin that if you give this drug, it helps children methylate better. And I started to take it myself. After I had Dr. Fry, who's on the front of my book. Dr. Fry is one of the amazing doctors who I adore, and he's the MTHFR gene mutation guy. And one year when I was speaking at Autism One, I went up to Dr. Fry and I said, Dr. Fry, could you please tell me what works better, Deplin or leucovorin on the MTHFR gene mutation? So he went into this huge medical explanation that was way over my head because he's too smart for the room. And I said, no. Back up the truck and give it to me in Dr. Mom terms. He weighs 175 pounds. How much? And he said, yeah, leucovorin works better, hands down. I started to take leucovorin myself, and it was like somebody lifted the brain fog from my head. And all of a sudden I could concentrate and I could remember things that I couldn't remember before. I used to have my husband keep my schedule because I'd always forget things. And it's not that way anymore. Now I remind him about things.
Is autism an autoimmune disorder?
I believe it is. I know, Ryan is living proof that when we fixed the things that were wrong with his immune system, and it wasn't just one thing, it was a bunch of things. And autism is very complicated. If it wasn't, more kids would be cured, okay? But it is. It's a lot of little things combined together. And you have to treat each of those little things. We treated him for sinus infections. We treated him for hidden viruses. He takes some meds still today that are antifungals and antivirals because he has hidden viruses. Okay, we're talking about the corona thing. Well, I knew about these hidden viruses long before the rest of the world because my kid had HHV6 and Epstein-Barr. And he still takes antiviral medicines to keep those in check. And the really hard part is finding the right doctor who knows how to treat this. We have a lot of doctors out there and they're all very dedicated and they mean well. They just never got Autism 101 in medical school. They didn't get it. And, a lot of parents go broke trying to find doctors to treat their kids because a lot of our doctors don't even take insurance. And that troubles me. We have one doctor here in town here. She is a neurologist and a pediatric neurologist, and she's opening clinics all over Southern California called Cortica, Corticach, and they treat it medically, and they have everything at those clinics. So once you get them working medically, you have to catch them up using the behavioral and educational techniques because they missed a lot. So even if you could wave a magic wand and say, poof, your body's normal, they wouldn't be normal because they've been doing these behaviors for a long time and they're learned. And, you know, it's sort of interesting. When Ryan was little, one of his behaviors, the one that used to drive me crazy, was he would bite and squeeze his sister, his older sister, until she cried. And she used to say to me, "Mom, can I hit him?" And I'd say to her, "Meg, when he's better, you can hit him." And it's still kind of a joke with them today. If he ticks her off, she'll haul off and slug him in the arm, and then they both laugh, you know. But no matter how hard I tried, even though I was trained in ABA, I couldn't stop Ryan from biting and squeezing his sister. And it was not until we brought the medical treatment on board that he was able to learn not to do that.
What was it? Because I don't hear of healing or
Recovery.
recovery.
Yes.
This is like, and truly, you realize the incidence of Epstein-Barr, Tay-Sachs. There are things genetic to us Eastern European Jews
Right.
that we are more susceptible to. I don't know what your husband's genetics are, but you know, many of these things are linked to autoimmune triggers that kick off these
Absolutely.
various syndromes. And you know, I've never had a glass of milk in my life. Hungarians, we weren't. Milk was not. Americans.
You know, it is important for these kids. Ryan has been dairy-free since he was about 4. And, you know, I once called the Autism Research Institute and talked to Dr. Bernie Rimland. He answered the phone himself. And at the time, I was so green, I didn't know who he was, so I wasn't very impressed. I should have been. And, you know, he was just this nice man who spoke to me because he had a kid with autism. And he said, "Have you ever tried taking Ryan off dairy and see what happens?" And if he probably would have said to me, you know, put him on a non-dairy diet, I probably wouldn't have done it. I was the kind of mom who gave my kids fun food for breakfast, and we had pizza several times a week. I wasn't very nutritiously conscious. And Dr. Rimland said to me, "Well, try taking him off milk for a week and then give him a glass of milk and see what happens." And oh my God, the change in him was so phenomenal. He was more tuned in. He could understand. Some of the noises decreased. He was no longer walking around the house plugging in that stupid portable radio in every outlet over and over and over again, you know. And it was amazing that just removing dairy had an impact that was huge.
You know, we, and people don't recognize this, but we Americans and humans are the only mammal that drinks the milk of another mammal.
Yes, you're right.
No other animal, no other mammal drinks the milk of another mammal. So it's not even within the biological construct of the food chain, which is why dairy is for some people, it's, you know, the stuff of life. The dairy that we would know would only be with cheeses, because
Right.
they were broken down. They were already, they were moldy. They were already in a point where the proteins were broken down. The lactose was already broken down, and therefore it was digestible and consumable. But never, to this day, 68 years old, I've never had a glass of milk.
Well, you know, and a lot of kids on the spectrum are gluten-free. Now, Ryan has never been gluten-free. And, you know, his doctor, who helped us the most, used to believe that they should just eat the cheapest white bread you can find that doesn't have dairy in it. Because sometimes the things like they tell us are so healthy, like the whole grains and everything like that, our kids can't digest them properly. Okay, and I know it goes against everything we've been taught. You're supposed to have milk, you're supposed to have calcium, you're supposed to have, whole grain bread. And, anybody who needs help can email me and I will send them the diet and I will help them find a doctor and all those things. I never charge for anything I do. I just want kids better.
Well,
Ryan, we used one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got that I would love to pass on to your listeners is to use what your kids obsess about or talk about or want to do over and over again to teach them. So once we got Ryan's body working somewhat, then we were able to teach him the things that he missed. And we used everything he loved to catch him up. So that meant every lesson had to have keys and locks and cars and electrical outlets and sharks. He loved technology. And you have to understand, this was before the internet. Back then, there wasn't enough information. Now there's too much information. And it's really hard for parents to realize what's helpful and what's not. I once was where they were now, and I was not convinced my son could ever get better. But what happened was I wanted to be able to tell myself, if I ever had to find placement for him, that I did everything possible to help him. And thank God for that Jewish guilt, because that's what kept me going. And that's what kept me working. And, I didn't believe he could get better at first. I really didn't. And there's a lot of kids out there that are better, and their parents, they sometimes go underground because they just want them to have a normal life. And I understand that. And my son doesn't want to put himself out there either. Okay. I kind of told him that we can, have pictures of him when he was little and everything else because, he works at a major aerospace company. Nobody there knows he was ever severely affected by autism. And his boss even came into his office and said, Ryan, you have really good people skills. And, Ryan said, thank you, and then of course he had to call me and we both started laughing because I taught him every one of those people skills. It's funny because he always seems to come out, I call it coming out of the closet. He seems to come out when people need help. Mm-hmm. When he was in college, I went up for a dinner from his fraternity and all the parents were there and I noticed this kid following him around the room. And I looked at Ryan and I kind of said, kind of touched, huh? That's our word for it. Ryan and I call it touched when somebody has autism. And he says, yeah, Mom, he really wants to be my friend. And then, of course, I got mad at him because I'm his mother. And I said, well, you better be his friend because you remember what it was like when you didn't have any. And he goes, Mom, calm down. He said, let me tell you what happened. Well, he was at the fraternity and that guy, that particular kid, was not there one day. And all the guys started talking about how they need to get rid of him because he makes them look bad and he's weird. Okay? And Ryan came out in front of all 60 guys at the fraternity and said, he has autism. And the reason I know this is because I used to have autism and it's medical and he can't help it. And he went on to explain everything to all of them. And later on, one of his fraternity brothers asked him to get up in front of a whole group of people at college and talk about his autism. And if this mother was never so proud, it was that moment when he did that. That's the real measure of a man. Somebody who has, those kind of beliefs and, stands up for those who can't stand up for themselves. Wow. That's part of the Jewish faith too, is to take care of those less fortunate than you.
Amen. It's exactly true. We're talking with Marcia Hinds, author of I Know You're in There, Winning Our War Against Autism, the real-life journey of the diagnosis to healing of autism. Words you never hear together. Healing of autism. If it can happen to Ryan, it can happen to your child. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to hear about some more of the techniques used over the course of time, what the reasonable expectation is, and how you have to approach that not every solution works for everybody, but tenacity is the real key. And how Marcia was able to harness her drive, her maternal instinct to know that there wasn't something wrong with her child, there was something right with her child, and it was trying to break out. And she helped pave the path for that victory. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Edo Canaan, in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganation.com/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganation.com to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English, and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganation.com/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, Messianic Rabbi Eric Walker. We're talking with Marcia Hinds, author of I Know You're in There, Winning Our War Against Autism. Marcia, welcome back to the program.
I'm so glad to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. Marcia, you say, you maintain, you have empirical evidence through your son that autism can be healed. Now, we're not talking about treated and medicated to the point where you are operating at the lower end of societal spectrum. We're talking about your son, who was fairly nonverbal, who was a squeezer and a biter, who was not communicative, but yet you pressed in to reach into his inner soul to pull out of him and to get the best medical attention possible, to categorize this not as a mental illness, but in a chronic
or psychiatric illness, or developmental illness.
Right, that this was something that was autoimmune, that there were things you could do to affect change within his environment, medication, nutrition, stimulation, all those things. And today, the proof is
he's leading a typical life.
He is leading an average person's life.
Well, not average. He's above average.
Above average.
Sorry, I don't have average kids.
Right. Working for an aerospace company as an engineer.
Yes. You know, when I have to tell you that he only began to make significant progress when we started to treat it medically. But we also combined the medical with the behavioral and the educational, and one wouldn't have worked without the other, because you need all of those together. Now, most of the kids on the spectrum are brilliant, but they can't communicate. When Ryan entered kindergarten, he was in the 3rd percentile for speech. By 4th grade, he was in the 85th percentile, but he was still weird, and he still didn't know how to have friends. He used to go up to kids and poke them on the arm because he wanted to be their friends, but he didn't know how to do it. Now, we took him for something called a neurospec when he was first diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And that is something that was only available at 4 places in the country at the time. Now it's available all over. And what a neurospec does is it measures blood flow to different areas of the brain. And the doctor who read this neurospec had never met Ryan. And he said, autism? Question mark, question mark, question mark. How could he know that my kid had autism just by the blood flow in his brain? He had what I refer to as encephalitis, inflammation of the brain. And if your brain is inflamed, the blood flow can't get to the areas that it needs to get to, like speech and social skills that are impaired in children with autism. I think it's similar for other psychiatric disorders, but it's a different part of the brain that's inflamed. And what was very interesting about this test is, you know, I don't think the test is really necessary to determine the treatment to use, but it was really necessary for me because it made me realize, yes, he does have autism, because, you know, we're all in denial. We don't want to admit it. And 3 years later, when we repeated the test, the blood flow was much improved, and so was Ryan. Now, we never treated Ryan with drugs to control his behavior. We treated Ryan with drugs that would help his immune system work better. So antivirals and antifungals were essential for him, and the medicine that I mentioned before, leucovorin, was also a biggie. And he still takes those today so that his immune system works properly. He wishes he didn't have to. But, you know, he tried to get off the antifungals once, and in about 2 weeks he called me and he said, Mom, I don't feel so good. And I said, well, what do you feel? And he said, well, I feel like I want to talk to myself out loud. And being his mother again, I said, well, you don't do it, do you? And he says, no, Mom, I know I'm not supposed to do that. And that's when I had to say to him, Ryan, I think you need to go back on the antifungals until the big cure comes along, because you need these. And we have some amazing things going on right now medically, treatments and trials. And Dr. Jim Adams, who is in Arizona, is doing trials with what's called MTT, microbiota transfer therapy. And what he's doing is he's fixing the gut of these kids and fixing their immune systems. And the symptoms are being decreased 40 to 70% by just treating what's wrong with their immune systems. And they're staying.
Let me stop you there for 1 minute.
Okay.
you said something. Inflammation.
Yes.
In April of 2006, Harvard Health Publishing out of Harvard Medical School published this document, Inflammation, a Unifying Theory of Disease, that diseases
Absolutely.
Diseases are a product of inflammation. It's part of the immune response. Depends on the physical action of white blood cells, the chemicals they produce, antibodies, cytokines, and the like. And they're now realizing that from an immunological standpoint, immunity system, that foods, that beverages, that grains, dairy, there are things which are inflammatory causing, which are the precursors to autoimmune disease responses to inflammation.
Yes.
So inflammation
That's
is
really
your
important research.
enemy.
John Hopkins has done a lot on it as well.
Inflammation is your enemy. Now, if you say that this neurospec is not something that
It's hard science.
right,
It's not.
right. It's something that however, if we looked at the brain, and I go back to Dr. Timothy Jennings, who is one of our featured guests here. He's a brain expert, an aging expert. We talk about inflammation when it comes to the aging brain. We also talk about the heart-shaped brain. He is a psychopharmacologist and a psychiatrist. We talk about those things that make aging. How do I age well? You know, as I get closer to.
This has implications for Alzheimer's and dementia as well.
Exactly. So
Yes.
if the inflammation is something we begin to address as a early onset dementia in your 50s, can be reversed by nutrition, by exercise, by even standing and elongating the neurons in the brain. Looking at inflammation as being a causal effect of autism, and even finding medications, anti-inflammatory, not non-steroidal anti-inflammatory, but those things that get to the heart, not to treat the symptom, but to remove the inflammatory agent. You've now uncovered a whole world of exploration of saying, if I can remove the inflammatory, I can help get them on a path to healing.
Right. And you know, one thing I want to tell you is, one question I always get from parents is it too late to help my child medically? Okay. And I want to tell you about Anne Milan, who wrote the book Autism Believe in the Future. And she didn't start helping her daughter Robin until she was 28 years old. And Robin, the only reason she did was to stop the screaming and the self-injurious behavior. And now Robin drives. She has a 30-hour-a-week job at a grocery store. She's a checker. She lives down the street independently from her mom, and her mom is starting to age now, and she's taking care of her mother instead of the other way around. And I just want parents to know it's never too late to start medical treatment, and Robin is the proof of that. Now, Robin isn't completely recovered the way my Ryan is, but she's having a darn good life. And, you know, I just think there's so much hope out there. And, you know, once our doctors realize that this is medical and treatable, there will be more research to come and more kids will be helped. And that's the whole purpose for me right now, is to get that out, that it's medical, it's treatable, and kids can get better.
That is one of the single most encouraging messages that I can ever hear in the discussion about autism? Never.
Well, the thing is I didn't know anyone who got better when Ryan was little. And everybody who I asked, well, did these kids ever get better? They wouldn't answer me. So I knew what the answer was. They didn't say no, but they didn't answer. And, that's one of the reasons why I have to shout it from the rooftops. And my son would rather I just sort of go away so he could live his happy life, but it's important. We need to save them all. We do. I made a promise to God and I'm going to keep it. We got to save them all.
For someone who has a child who is being told their child is on the autism spectrum, devastating news, the dream from the day you find out you're pregnant, of all the plans you begin to make and all the dreams and visions you have, all of a sudden are blown to smithereens because it is a life sentence.
It is a life sentence. And the fear and desperation we feel is, horrible. And there's a lot of people out there that kind of, they kind of play on that fear and desperation and tell us, they have the cure of the week for autism. And if it sounds too easy to be true, it probably is, because it's a very difficult journey, but it is so worth it.
We've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
I want you to share, if you would, some of the successes, but also some of the ways to self-preserve as a caregiver to make sure that you don't fall into the pit of despair, that you don't give up, that you don't turn to alcohol, to drugs, to your husband walking out the door because he can't handle it. How do you navigate in love and maintain a healthy marriage and frustrating moments of caregiving that every caregiver, of which there are 20% of all Americans, are in some degree of caregiving, larger than the percentage of autism, but falls in that you're a caregiver, but you're also a champion for healing. What advice can you give based on your experience? Things to do and maybe some things not to do.
That is really a good question. If you read my book, it may look like I knew what I was doing, but I was mostly hanging on by my fingernails, trying not to fall. The book gives you a lot of the things that I did that helped me. It also gives you all the mistakes I made. What you have to realize is that, God allows you to make mistakes, and you can always turn in another direction if you're not doing it right. The one thing you can't do is give up. Okay, you got to keep going no matter what, no matter how tired you are. You can't give up when you're tired. You can only give up when you're done. And even then you can't give up because, we're never done with our kids. I mean, my son he has his own house. He has 2 roommates that pay his mortgage. He now just got a dog. And I just had to go down there and teach him how to get his dog to like one of the roommates. We're never done. We really aren't. And I think the important thing is to keep going. Now, my husband and I almost didn't make it, really, because it was very, very difficult. Fortunately, he didn't give up on me. I mean, I kept trying to push him out of my way so I could just fix the kid, and every day was Ryan, and more Ryan. And when I was done with Ryan, then it was time to take care of Megan. And there really wasn't much left for Frank. And I always tell my parents that we all want, men are much easier than women. All they want is they want a little attention, a little respect, and, there's a couple things that you guys always like that I won't even go into. But they like a little good food every once in a while, and it doesn't take a lot to make them happy. And if you do those things, they're going to do whatever they can to help you. I always tell my mom, you go up, when you see your husband doing something wonderful with your kid, because it's hard to do, you go up and you give him a full body hug, and then you walk away and say, boy, you're a good dad. That's all they want. That's it. And I didn't do that. And that was a mistake. Fortunately, my husband didn't give up on us. But I was so tired and so worn out that I didn't do all the important things that I needed to do for my husband. Because if I didn't have him bringing in the bacon, there's no way I could have fixed the kid.
In most relationships, strong woman, maybe not as strong a man. Strong man, maybe not as strong a woman. Opposites attract. Where you're weak, I'm strong. Where you're strong, I'm weak. You two had a common unifier that was also a common divider.
Yes.
And competed for your attention, like a baby who never gets past the 3-month stage of constantly crying out, being up, up day and night, in a stage of never getting past that. Sleep deprived and not thinking of yourself and being selfless, but at the cost of your spouse.
Yes.
That's an important message, is that you don't let the urgent outweigh the important.
Well, and another thing that I really want parents to know is you got to catch your kid doing the things that are right, okay? And sometimes that's really hard when they have autism, because they may only do 1 or 2 things right per day. And you have to reinforce those things and try and ignore as much as possible what they're doing wrong. That works with husbands, that works with bosses, that works with, teachers. It's really hard to walk that line. And that was a really important thing that we did, that, our kids experience they do things wrong. So they experience a lot of people always telling them they're doing it wrong. So they need to hear that they're doing it right. And they may not be able to communicate with you what they need, but they're in there, and they're smart, and you have to keep talking to them, because that's how they learn speech. And I actually told the rabbi before we started, I said, you know what? You don't have to talk at all, because I can hold on a conversation for both of us, because that's what I used to have to do with Ryan. I talked to him constantly. And what I didn't realize, it looked like the lights weren't on and nobody was home. But what I didn't realize is he was in there and he was learning, only in stealth mode. Okay? He was learning from the things I was telling him, but he didn't look at me. He didn't nod his head. He didn't show me one way or another that he was learning. But he was. And I didn't know till he was better that those were things he only could have learned when I kept talking to him.
Wow. It is an amazing story of overcoming what the world has considered to be a terminal diagnosis, and in fact it is the opposite. It is an opportunity to rise up and deploy medical resources, psychological resources, parenting resources, nutritional resources, the most holistic approach, and God resources. Prayer helps.
And if they look me up on the internet, they can find my website. It's actually www, the word autism, the word and treatment, no spaces.com. and you'll find me. You can actually preview the book on Amazon or on my website, and then you'll know if it's something that's going to help you or not.
Well,
don't buy it until you know.
Yeah. We'll make this really easy. Go to the website you're probably watching this on, ignitingnation.com. Click on today's Marcia Hinds interview. I know you're in there. You'll see a picture of the book. Just click on that book. It'll take you everywhere you need to go. One step right through our website.
Ooh, I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Rabbi.
You're welcome. Marcia Hinds, I know you're in there. Winning our war against autism. It has been a machaya. I don't know if you know Yiddish, but machaya.
I don't. Tell me what it is.
Machaya is a blessing.
Thank you.
Okay, it is a blessing to have you on the program with us. May the Lord bless all the works of your hand, and Ryan and your husband as well. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.